everyone. Welcome back for another Emotional Health Thursdays. We are in October.
Wow,
Yeah.
it's October and it's getting kizzo.
Quite. So, as you all may already know, October is Substance Abuse Prevention Month. So, we thought it'd be a great time to spread more awareness on what substance abuse prevention is and how it impacts Black women, especially. Some other awareness months in October include Breast Cancer Awareness Month, Down Syndrome Awareness Month, as well as Eye Injury and Contact Lens Safety Awareness Month, and Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Okay. Before we continue with the topic on substance abuse, I did want to give some caveat in terms of the connection between this topic and our topic last month, which was seasonal depression or seasonal affective disorder. That's correct. Right? Yeah. It's like, hold on.
You got it.
Where substance use can be one of the coping mechanisms that people use if they're going through depression, even if you're not aware that it's becoming a dependency. And so it's very important to also think about how some of the things that we talk about may connect based on the symptoms that you may be experiencing or the risk that may be posed based on the mental health issues that you're experiencing. Okay. So first and foremost, we want to define substance abuse. Now we can talk about it a bit more in depth. One, substance abuse refers to the harmful or hazardous use of psychoactive substances, including alcohol and illicit drugs. It involves the excessive or inappropriate consumption of substances leading to physical, mental, emotional, or social harm. So this really means that substance abuse isn't only alcohol, which some people may think when they hear that term. And also it can have multiple effects beyond just physical. There's also the mental, emotional, and social components. Right, and then of course, going briefly into the different types of substance use disorders, because it is an official diagnosis. It includes alcohol use disorder, opioid use disorder, stimulants use disorder, cannabis use disorder, which is often debated upon if cannabis can become an addiction, but it can.
Yeah.
Also, sedative, hypnotic, or I can't pronounce this word. Anxiolytic.
And this is like anxiolytic.
Right, anxiolytic.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with that.
Okay.
If y'all know, y'all let us know.
Please do, please do. Anxiolytic use disorder, hallucinogen use disorder, inhalants use disorder, which I wanted to also mention because it's coming on the rise again, where people are smoking balloons.
Yeah, I saw that something there.
I went to a party once where it was happening. I was like, why are we doing this?
Like, what in the hell came out of this one? Like, y'all just be making stuff up.
Yeah, I've never heard of it. Okay.
Yeah, they get high off of like either I guess sniffing the balloons or like inhaling it. It has some kind of gases, and people can even do this with glue or paint thinners. But this does also cause damage and cognitive impairments or sudden death. So it is quite risky as well. Of course, tobacco use disorder, which the kids are vaping a lot more now too. All connected. And then of course there are some other unknown substance use disorders, but this really shows the different range of substances that can become problematic depending on how much is being consumed.
So just for clarity of the terms in terms of why they changed it from use and abuse, because you're using them interchangeably, but they're no longer using abuse as an actual disorder because it indicates illegal and legal action. And so you can have a misuse of a drug or a substance and it not be illegal. So for example, alcohol misuse, you can still buy it legally. Now cannabis misuse, you can still buy it legally, but also have using it maladaptive, like I'm using it to function for depression, I'm using it to function for anxiety versus resolving other areas that might impact. So we're saying abuse, but misuse or use is the word that we're thinking of.
I didn't realize the abuse was connected to the legal. Interesting.
Right, like child abuse. You know, like when we think about it, it still is the traumatic actions and behaviors, but when it comes to the diagnostic and even the goal is to make it less stereotypical around negative in legal actions, like I'm using, like, cause you can use an over-the-counter drug and misuse it, and that become a part of a disorder.
Interesting.
And think of it also like, let me say this. When somebody thinks of abuse, that means they automatically assume that a person has addiction. However, when you have a misuse, you could also learn harm reduction,
Okay.
right? So when you're using the term abuse, you're automatically meaning that the person is illegally or not using it wrong. However, you can have harm reduction and use a substance and it still not be adaptive behaviors or the right thing.
Yeah.
Not the right, I don't want to say right thing, but it could be misused. So for a minute, they were saying misuse, now they're saying use again. So the change is really around law and legality as well as addiction.
Makes sense. That's good to know, actually. And then, of course, when we think about warning signs, either for someone who is experiencing it or if you're a loved one who's witnessing another misusing a substance, these warning signs can really help to raise awareness and also to provide support. One is behavioral signs, which include changes in behaviors. This can be sudden mood swings, irritability, or aggression. Neglecting responsibilities, so someone who's either falling behind on school, work, or at home. Also withdrawal from social activities, so such as avoiding friends, family, and activities that they once enjoyed. Risky behavior, which includes engaging in any dangerous activities such as driving under the influence. Secrecy, such as hiding your substance use or being evasive about activities that you're engaging in. And lastly, here, legal or financial problems, which is an unexplained need for money, stealing, or facing legal issues that are related to the substance use.
I'm just laughing because I'm thinking like, we know those people who take your stuff, try to sell it back to somebody else. Go ahead.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I was gonna say like we probably have seen these in others. And sometimes if you're someone who is also dealing with a substance use disorder, you may have also like, exhibited these things too.
And I think even like some of the ones that are so like easy for us to kind of like dismiss as not that serious. It's like you're hiding or you're not telling people about it or you're doing it, but you don't want people to know you're doing it. Cause that's that secrecy part or that hiding where probably, or you've probably got a feeling that this isn't the right way to use this substance, but I also don't want no one to tell me or see that I'm misusing it. So then there's this psychological like shame or guilt that comes up every time you're doing or using that substance. Cause I'm thinking of a few of my previous clients who didn't quite believe they had a problem, but you can see it was starting to impact their life. Yeah. Like everything's a secret. Like if it wasn't if it was nothing wrong with it, then why would you need to keep it a secret?
And even thinking about culture too, where culturally you might be like, oh, it's just one drink, or it's just a couple of drinks, and that's just how my family celebrated this, or that's how we dealt with certain things. And it becomes normalized in the sense that you don't see it as a problem. But then if you're hiding it again from other people, or if you're actively justifying it, even though you're seeing the effects that it's having on you or your loved ones, then it also becomes
and you don't want nobody to tell you anything about it. Like, cause it's like, oh, you're judging me.
Right.
And it's really not them, it's probably yourself. Like that's actually thinking about it being judged.
Okay, and looking at the physical signs as well, this includes bloodshot eyes or dilated pupils, sudden weight loss or weight gain, poor hygiene or changes in appearance, unexplained injuries or frequent accidents, and slurred speech or impaired coordination. And of course, some of these symptoms can also be due to other things. So I always think about it from a Black woman perspective, where you might assume that it's substance use and it's actually other physical health conditions that are occurring or co-occurring. So as a loved one or even a medical professional or a mental health professional, it's important to also ask further questions to not assume or misdiagnose.
Yeah. Speak to someone about it because you don't want to just assume it's that when it could be something like a health issue.
Okay, so next we have psychological signs, which include increased anxiety, paranoia or fearfulness, sudden depression or lack of motivation, memory problems or difficulty concentrating, and extreme mood changes or emotional instability.
Yeah, yes. I think this one, especially when people are having a problem identifying or recognizing that they have an issue, they don't see how it's starting to impact their relationships.
Mhm.
And like every single one that you've marked on here or just read actually sound like signs where it's like you're starting to separate and or be isolated because of the substance, right? Because then it's like, I don't want people to always be in my business. I'm thinking people are saying stuff about me.
Mhm.
So now all of a sudden I'm avoiding and being like dismissive of our relationship around like, I don't want to be around people. Or every time we go out, because now I'm making it a little bit more, every time we go out, you're the one who gets so drunk that everybody's like, here we go, we gotta put them in the car, get them to shut up, get them to stop getting us in trouble. Possibly you getting DUIs or, like, you're not seeing that these things are starting to impact your relationships specifically. And that becomes like part of it to me psychological, because it really is, now you're hiding it, but now you're also deceiving yourself.
Yeah.
Like you're trying not to feel either the depression, anxiety, anger, hurt, trauma that you might have experienced that we don't always just list as one of the anxiety or depression. So to me, I think that one's the one that we all kind of dismiss because they always get there, they always got an attitude. I'm thinking of like stuff that we say when people drink. And I'm using drinking as the one that's the more socially acceptable. But we do it also with when someone's smoking or doing other things where it's like, all right, it's just because they're drinking, drank too much today. But then we notice that every time we go out or every time we're doing something, they're drunk, right? It's not fun anymore. It's starting to become like concerning, yeah.
And drinking to get drunk regardless of what everybody else is doing.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it's been some of those things, It's they regardless of, it's quote unquote social, but not really, like you're in the mix, but you're not matching the energy. So if everyone's just, sipping on some wine at a dinner and you're ordering shot after shot after shot.
Yeah.
Like we were all, partaking, but we don't have the same goal.
Yeah.
And it's to the point, like the memory loss thing, I'm thinking like how often they'll have like drunken forgetfulness.
Like blackout.
Yeah, like I was trying not to use that term, because it may not be a full blackout.
Right.
Sometimes it's the like
the little
you're going too far and you can't remember pieces, which are blackouts, but it's like now it's becoming a pattern of your drinking.
Right.
Like or substance that you're using, because it's not always just drinking.
Because maybe it's getting high, like whatever, and so you're always the person that's in this state, and it's like, oh gosh, like, come on.
Yeah, I jumped down. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. No, but it's also interesting thinking about like who you're around when you're using certain substances, because for some people, their friend group is who they use primarily.
Right.
And so it looks different where you're all getting like,
oh yeah,
I don't even know the word.
You're all using the substance to get high, and to the point where you're it's maladaptive, where it can be harmful to yourself or someone else in this case. Yeah.
And in those cases, it may look different where you're not isolating because that's your core group that you're with. Maybe you're not being secretive. Your friends can see you doing it out in the open. You might be neglecting responsibilities. And so that's when you have to decipher between what is normal in those cases and what's a bit more excessive.
Right.
Yeah, because sometimes our crowd will excuse it for us, right? So depending on the crowd, if we're all getting drunk to get drunk, then of course I'm gonna say nothing was wrong.
Right.
If I'm also struggling with that form of usage, like it's gonna be different if it's like, oh, it's just the one person who's acting like overindulging. But if it's all of us, this is our way we party.
Exactly, which is why it's so imperative to think about that during the season that you are in life, because in college it's easy to
completely
not see the signs, because every Thursday we all out with the same agenda.
Right.
Every Friday we out with the same agenda. Every Saturday we out with the same agenda. So you may not notice, but I'm also on a different agenda Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday than everyone else. And they may not be able to see that because there's other things going on. So.
Yeah. So seasons matter.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the isolation and the separation matters, the friend group matters.
Mm-hmm.
All of those factors can sometimes blur the lines with us as Black women because we do want to fit into our groups.
Right.
We do want to make sure people don't feel shamed. Because I'm thinking of a few of my friends who, as we got older, I remember thinking, wow, this so-and-so is having wine every night.
Mhm.
And it's like, not even just a glass of wine, they drinking a bottle, they're drinking the full thing, and
Yeah.
it's getting to the point, right? To the point where they're actually out.
Right.
And it's like, now you're using it as a sedative to
Right.
drink, so you can go to sleep. But then, so none of us were having a conversation with this person, and I'm like, oh, this could be a problem.
Mm.
Versus when we were all a little younger, we would be going out and
Happy hour every day.
like, so in the season, it's almost like a
Right.
social activity,
Mhm.
but it also became this thing where it's like, well, now that we're like families and life, and it's like,
Mhm.
well, you know what, let's meet up for dinner. I ain't having nothing to drink because I gotta go drive 30 minutes or
Mhm.
40, but let's just enjoy. But that person is still like,
Right.
Yeah.
no, I don't care what we're doing. It has to be a part of the experience.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so seasons really do matter because I didn't see it the same
Mm-hmm.
until you realize
Mm-hmm.
where it's like, wait, I don't know about y'all, but I'm sleepy,
Yeah,
so
we
I'm not
have We ain't 21
I'm
anymore.
not trying to drink, 'cause they have to drive an hour and a half from New York, like, because I am going home tonight.
Yeah, I'm not sleeping on your floor tonight.
Like, none of that. So when I think about it, it's like that seasons is something you really, really have to be sure so that you also are not over critiquing yourself,
Mhm.
but also being aware that at some season, if it continues, is it really gonna be what you want your life to be a part of?
Right.
Yeah, that's a big question.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there are also social signs, which you've already touched on, which include changes in your social circle, associating with a new group of friends involved in substance use, isolation, which is preferring to be alone or avoiding social interactions, and also conflicts in your relationships, so increased arguments or distancing from loved ones. Okay. And now we want to look at the impact of substance abuse, specifically within the cultural context of how it impacts Black women. First is the health impacts. So Black women often face barriers to accessing healthcare, which can exacerbate the health risks associated with substance abuse or use in this case. Chronic substance use can lead to cardiovascular issues, liver damage, and mental health disorders, all of which can go untreated due to lack of access to quality care.
Yes, amen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that one is, as we talked about, I don't know what month, we talked about like health, and then we talked about it more specifically with sex health. But when we think about all of the areas that are impacted, that impact our health, if you misuse any substance, be it alcohol or food,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to ultimately impact your health later in life around your heart, your liver, your kidney. And I think about it from the perspective of how many older Black women that I know that are struggling with one of those areas and or now has to try to get treatment or use medication. And then I think now that I look back, I'm like, there probably was one of the substances that were being misused, even if it wasn't an illegal substance,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very tricky one in that case, because again, the seasons, when you're younger, or even as at a particular season in your life, it might be normalized to engage in certain levels of substance use, but then it impacts you later on.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And for some, it impacts them right then and there, so you
Yeah.
never know.
And I think I don't know if we are gonna hit this, but there's also the reality of chemical imbalances in our family and in our DNA. And so when we think about it from that perspective, we have a higher risk of being able to even control the substance use or control the misuse of the substance if we don't resolve that or know about it enough to say, what are my boundaries around it, right? So even being able to understand early on, I might not be able to drink or smoke or do drugs that other people can do because I could get addicted because in my DNA, chemical imbalance related to that or mental health, right? Because it's not just can put us in a position to be more susceptible to it being a full out addiction.
Absolutely.
Right. So
that's really key too. I remember I had a friend who he knew that I think his grandfather or his dad was an alcoholic. And so he was always cautious around alcohol, like I'm not going to drink. or I'm not gonna drink too much, because it can become this pattern. And so it's really important to know the family history, if you are aware of that, and even just know how certain substances can impact you physically.
Absolutely.
And being
And a
aware that
gateway.
addiction is addiction.
Yeah.
Addiction is addiction. So even if mama was addicted to this and daddy was addicted to this, and you avoid those, but you start to misuse other things, you're still
It
prone
still
to
could come up,
addiction.
you're prone, yeah.
Completely.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, and of course, as we're talking about these barriers to care, it's important to also acknowledge that within the Black community at large, there is a stigma around mental health and even stigma around substance use. And so this can also make it harder for Black women to help seek for certain things that they're experiencing. And then also when there's underrepresentation in treatment programs, it can feel hard to really find someone who's listening and can provide adequate care for you. So with these risks that are already there for Black women, it becomes even more important to consider the health impacts of substance use.
And I think more so like that, like there's a lot fewer therapists who specialize in substance use that are Black. And I'm like, when I try to do referrals or try to think of people I absolutely am struggling right now to even think of anyone that I can say off the back, I know so-and-so does this and it's their area.
Right, like that's
specialty.
their thing.
So I think that's definitely something to think about related to even what might be barriers to us discussing substance use. Like who do we turn to or who do we turn to and not feel judged, right? Because I think that stigma around substance use, even we're doing it somewhat because there's this level of like what's acceptable to talk about. Like we haven't mentioned cocaine, we haven't mentioned crack, we haven't mentioned heroin, we haven't mentioned them besides when we talked about it as a disorder. But the reality is that it's more likely that kids are using certain hallucinogens and I say kids, sorry y'all, but younger folks are using actual drugs
Party
that might
drugs.
be party
Ecstasy,
drugs,
Molly.
ecstasy, exactly. So the reality is even that stigma around what comfort level we have to even talk about them without feeling like we're going to either make people feel shamed and or feel like we're doing something against like what's okay and cool to do. Because I think cannabis being one of the ones which is difficult to talk about because people are having a hard time deciding and or agreeing upon if it can be an addiction or not, but it really is no different than say food or other addictions that may not be a biological addiction. However, it can be a psychological one. And I think being able to have those conversations comes down to also the stigma within our community. Because when immediately, if I say substance use or substance abuse, first people we thinking of really are crackheads and heroin addicts.
And alcoholics. It's like
those it. But when we really think about what might be some higher levels of misuse now, especially in our community, it's really it's merely marijuana and
Party drugs.
Drinking.
Yeah.
Because the party drugs now is just Tic Tac candy. Like if I mean, from what I've noticed in the communities that I served, I mean, it's talked about, like I know when I was younger, that wasn't necessarily our thing. A little weed, some alcohol, sure, but Molly, ecstasy, those things, they weren't as accessible or they were way more expensive.
Just whatever you call the opioid this day, because it's either perks or this or that.
And I think now with even a lot of the misuse, a lot more access to even psychotropic medication and being able to sell that on the black market, a lot more access. So, and it's right, these are things that we don't necessarily talk about, but there are high schools that are searched on the regular. These things are found, middle schools where these things are found on the regular. So it is something that we need to talk about as a community, especially as Black women, because it's there, it's here, and we're dealing with it, whether it's directly or indirectly, we are dealing with it.
Yeah, and I think it's helpful even to have these conversations out loud because sometimes we don't know how to talk about it. Like, so sometimes I'm not good. I mean, even as a professional, sometimes I'm exhausted trying to help people see what might be an issue or not, right? But when it's your friends and your family, it's like, they're not killing nobody, right? They just, if they smoke their weed every day, it is what it is, right? But in reality, there's a failure to launch. There's the memory issues. There's so many things that could be going on that are going to have long-term impact. that even though I'm not saying something now, it's gonna impact that person and or your family later.
And I love that you brought up that it needs to be highlighted all of the addictions. Because we may know this person, because even when I'm thinking about food addiction, when we think about that person, oh, they gonna come to the family function and they gonna eat everything or get your plate before they arrive, and it's like made up as a joke, but it's like maybe this person is really struggling
And we're not,
we're not addressing it, but like they're like, in order even to be in that setting, they have to cope with food or whatever it is else that's going on in their life. They're coping with food or escaping with food, even in those social settings. When I think about people who show up to functions, like let's say a child's birthday party or whatever it is, and no one else, the agenda is not to be on something, but they show up because it's a way to, I'm here with you all, but I can't really be here with you all. And to figure out, well, you know, what is that about other than just like Sharea said, dismissing it, like, there they go high again, or there they go drunk again, or there they go eating again. But to really be curious and lean in, like, what's going on?
And is there some help that we can offer? Like, sometimes there is a lack of access, but some other times it's just, they just aren't ready to be able to receive that. And so, but still being able to recognize those signs that we talked about earlier as more than just, oh, okay, it's a moment. No, this has now become a pattern.
Every time.
Yeah. Like, this
We on
person is
grocery
depressed when they ain't drunk.
And you lit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or you can't get to the grocery store because you're so high.
And then, of course, also thinking about the socioeconomic consequences of substance abuse, which include financial instability, job loss, reduced productivity, or difficulty maintaining steady employment. For some people, also just worsening financial hardships. This can, of course, lead to things like homelessness or even just further the wage gaps and economic barriers. And then, of course, if we're thinking again about homelessness, there's a lot of housing instability that people experience. And this is even worse for like single mothers who may lack a strong support network as well.
I'm like, these check, when I'm thinking of people and those who may not be resolved and or talk about their actual misuse of whatever substance, because this isn't just one type of substance I'm thinking of in my mind. But as you were reading that list, I was like, oh, check. And I can see some of the, like, no one's saying anything. Like,
or it's excusable. Like my mind is always gonna go back to sexuality, or it always does. But I'm thinking of sex and intimacy, especially in college settings, where for some people, every sexual experience is under the influence of something. It's like Thursday night, I get, you know, and I take this person home. And this is for all genders, all sexual orientations. In college, usually a lot of sexual experiences that happen are under the influence, which is why even talking about consent is difficult in that setting because of a lot of the experiences. A lot of the experiences we either just came from a party or most of them we just came from a party. And thinking thinking of that, where some people then, and if those are their first encounters with sex and intimacy going into adulthood out of that college season, now it's hard to attach to people in a sober mind and have those experiences because you're so used to being under the influence. So
that's also a long-term impact, right? So even though in the moment the consequence is maybe I enjoy, or it might feel like it's an immediate gratification, or I don't feel the consequences alone. But in the long term, how then does it affect if I'm able to have intimacy outside of those moments? Like, do I need to get high or have extra, some type of stimulants, whatever it is in my system to be able to do things or to perform? Like, that's something I'm just sitting here and thinking, I'm like, wow, I never even considered that because it's not something that's my norm, or I don't know people, but I actually now, it's not that I don't know people, I don't think of it that way, right? Because I'm like, we know people who, like, men and women.
That's what all genders, all sexual orientations,
Yeah.
it's real. And it's from my studies, it's very prevalent in the LGBT community, which we don't talk about enough, because it's appeared to be more socially acceptable for those exchanges to happen under those circumstances. But it has long-term effects.
And That's
Interesting.
interesting, yeah.
I'm like, yeah, that's such a good like
Yeah.
information because I'm like, yes, when you're saying it, I hear it and it all makes sense,
Yeah.
right? But I don't think we talk about it. Again, I'm
Mhm.
like, wow, this is something that you have entire generations that would just be like, oh, that's just a good time.
And we've totally made drunken love. We made it acceptable.
Right.
Weezy all night.
Right, whole skin. You're wrapping this up, like. Wow, that's funny. But no, I feel like, I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, yeah, because it becomes now your love pattern, or in this case, your sexual love pattern,
Yeah.
right? Where it's like, that's what I started, that's how, and in some cases, depending on what you felt about learning about yourself and identifying what pleasures or sexual pleasures you may, it might be because you couldn't get to be bold enough, and now here you are misusing a substance that will last with you ongoing.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking too. If sex or intimacy for you has always been attached to shame or even fear for some people, or like judgment or stigmas, then like if you're using substances to get through the acts, then it becomes like a dependency as well. So it's so layered, even just beyond just enjoyment. Like for some people, it can be
Enjoyment.
yeah, like it can be deep-seated pain or trauma that's unacknowledged. Interesting.
We over here like, yes.
Yeah. Jeez. And then of course, going along with other consequences includes family and community impacts, where substance abuse can place a significant burden on relationships with family, partners, and friends, leading to isolation, for some people, domestic violence, or breakdowns in support systems. And then, of course, if we're thinking about government interventions, people have lost their children or their families due to like the foster care system, or the government intervening based on what they're hearing about.
Or the actual neglect of the child, right? And neglect and abuse, right? Because the reality is that now the consequence isn't just that the person who's using the substance, but now the family has the consequence of not being able to maintain structure enough for safety, right?
Yeah.
So I think that becomes one of those blurred lines again, where we don't want to not reunify and keep people with their families, but if the substance or the misuse of the substance has gotten to the point where it's now harmful to the children or to the family system, do you keep the children there trying to figure out this person's system or this person's misuse, or do you get them the support and hope that we can work on getting your substances together in order to unify? It's a hard one, but that's a long-term consequence now, because then you talk about foster care, right? So now when we think about all of these like steps that can lead to such long-term consequences, they're layered by not just the substance that you use, but why you're using it.
Yeah.
Of course, and as we're talking about stigma around substance use and abuse, and so like for when it comes to the legality piece, there is a lot of discrimination for Black women especially, where Black women face harsher legal penalties compared to their white counterparts for similar substance-related offenses, which further perpetuates the cycle of poverty and substance abuse.
Absolutely. I think when we tell, like, I immediately have two examples of former clients. When I was like early in my career, I did case management, and it was specifically mental health. And sometimes we had people who had comorbid or two different diagnoses at the time. And the consequences that my Black clients who had any form of substance misuse attached to their disorder, the treatment was clearly incarceration in the past, and or they were more likely to not be enrolled into programs or people accept them into programs. And I can remember even then, because this is maybe 2000 and the early 2000s, like 5, 6, like in those to that time frame. Even then, I realized that this has been a system problem, because one of the gentlemen I was working with at the time, he was like 57, had severe schizophrenia and substance use attached as a disorder, and they would incarcerate him every time anything happened. And it was like, so wait, my white counterpart or client that I'm seeing who has the same diagnosis never had any incarcerations, and they were around the same age.
Wow.
And I just was always like, this isn't, and this isn't just my male ones. This was the female or Black women that I also had. So it was very noticeable from even then, which means that it's a historical issue. Like when it comes to penalizing And we think about it now, even with the way the opioid treatment was and is, in terms of the money that was pushed for those communities, because it was primarily white people of middle to upper class who were being initially impacted, and then started to become a drug of choice regardless of race. But at that initial onset, the money was pushed because primarily it was white middle-class women addicted to opioids, over-the-counter prescriptions, and they were more likely to want to service them so they wouldn't get incarcerated. Versus if we think about the crack epidemic, now we're going on to a whole other story. But if we think about the crack epidemic, half of them are incarcerated and or dead because there was lack of treatment and or response to the substance because it was primarily Black and brown people.
Yeah.
So
completely.
I
Like,
know that didn't mean to go all there, but
yeah.
I mean, call a thing a thing.
Right. And it shows the disparity between who gets rehab versus who gets jail.
Exactly, because that was the case with all, like, I'm thinking of, like, I had a few that are literally were like stairs, like they're literally 1 or 2 years apart in age. And to have absolutely none and to have like years just because of being a Black man or a Black woman tells me that there's an issue with the system, not just the disorder.
Definitely.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah, we like topics in topics. That was a systemic racism issue.
Yeah.
Like, so.
And now, of course, looking at the mental health disparities, Black women are more likely to experience trauma, including domestic violence, sexual assaults, and racial discrimination, which can contribute to substance use as a form of self-medication. And I think Sharea touched on this with comorbidities. Black women with substance abuse disorders are more likely to have co-occurring mental health disorders like depression or PTSD, which are often undiagnosed or untreated for this demographic.
Absolutely, because even the person that I was talking about that was the wine at night, it was depression. Like, and as her friends, we wanted to help and didn't know how, but eventually, I mean, I can't watch and not say something. If I consider you my friend, I'd rather lose you as you to being upset with me than to say I never said anything. And so even just having the conversation, she admitted that that was what was going on. I'm depressed. I have a lot of stuff going on with divorce and separation, and it feels like I'm alone. And I'm like, oh, but I thought we were meeting up, and but you have to have a conversation. And for her to admit it meant that she had to go and figure out what that meant, and I just support her. And I mean, I love her enough where I won't give too many details, but I know that it was important that somebody say it because she may have never even, she would have just kept hiding it. So sometimes it is our jobs as friends to just be like, I see you and I hope that I can help. And if I can't, I don't want you to think that no one saw you, even if you don't see yourself yet.
Yeah. And even if we're thinking again, we talk about different kinds of substances like drugs, people can also be using those to, I guess, to counter or to cure their anxiety in certain spaces. If you're going to a party, you want to have a drink, maybe you want to smoke, or you want to take a drug that you feel like is going to help loosen you up. But as a result, if that then becomes your fix every single time that you're in certain environments,
You gotta
then
do it.
then you can't even function with just being you.
I remember the first time I learned that substance misuse does not indicate that you have to do it every single day. It's also when and why, it's why you use it or misuse it, right? So someone can drink nothing during the week and then binge on the weekend and really be considered a substance, a person who's misusing a substance because you're using it to try to get drunk or try to get high, and you're using it to try to dismiss or replace something else that you're not dealing with.
Yeah. That's true, because in the dependency is just in those situations, in those environments. And then, of course, lastly, we have the impact on future generations, where the consequences of substance misuse on Black women can extend to future generations, which include children, potentially, neglect, trauma, or the effects of prenatal substance exposure as well.
I mean, I don't think any of us can deny the reality of, and I said it earlier, the crack epidemic. And if we think about even the consequences of what were happening to children and babies, that's a very severe, right? But when we think about alcoholism and we think about unresolved alcoholism and what it can do to the fetus, like those types of things impact the child's mobility, but also their long life,
Mhm.
right? Because at the end of the day, depending on the developmental, the support and neglect that they might not get because you're unable to actually parent, all of those things are going to have consequences on the next generation.
Yeah, yeah,
And trauma doesn't always have to show up the same way.
right.
Right, so your neglect in one generation may not mean that they're automatically going to end up on a substance
Right.
or using or misusing a substance, but it also may impact their relationships, their
Mhm.
ability to feel connected in community, right? When we think about infants and the importance of touching and care and how many people don't have that early on when their parents are using or using drugs as a substitution for care, they don't have the connection with their
Right.
children, within in turn, later in life, there might be a disconnect with how you even relate to love.
Mhm.
Like, so there's so many consequences. I'm just thinking of like, so many people only see like the medical
Mhm.
consequences, but there's so many social consequences in our community
Mhm.
around love and care. I think when we talk about gender and how it impacts gender, we gotta be honest with how it impacts Black women
Mhm.
related to neglect and also exposure to sexual abuse.
Yeah.
Right, because you, as a parent, if you're leaving your children a lot more susceptible to visitors and people,
Mhm.
because you yourself are not present, you also put them at a higher risk of being abused in some format.
Right.
So it's like all of those factors that this substance creates for the entire family.
Right.
Completely.
Yeah, I just had to say that because I'm like, yeah, intergenerational, say we got generations now that are still impacted because of the crack epidemic.
Yeah.
Completely.
I would also argue that we talk about the crack epidemic, but we skip the heroin after the Vietnam War.
Mhm.
When in reality, that was a precursor to what will become the crack epidemic.
Mhm.
And because we don't talk about that, when we don't realize the substances that impacted the children that age may not look like stimulants, which is like ADHD, all those type of things, we're missing the thing like depression, anxiety, because then that generation would be a little bit older, their children now, but most of them would also be the parents underneath the people who were on crack.
Mhm.
So I think we have a lot to, but that's for another time. Another thing.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
That's
I did
more
a
like
really
history.
good, I have to look at finding it. I did a really good presentation on this for Super, for one of the agencies that we work with, related to like the history impact on Black and Brown community
Mhm.
in terms of substances, and how the crack epidemic is always talked about, but the
Right.
heroin is skipped because, similar to what opioids are doing
Yeah.
now,
Face.
it changes the face of the parenting and the safety of the children.
Mhm.
So,
The same way we talk about weed a lot and we attach that to Black and Brown,
mhm,
but we're not talking about the pill popping
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
happens simultaneously in the suburbs.
mhm.
We don't talk about that.
Yep.
Interesting. And now we've talked a lot about the negative impact, so we'll offer some tips for overcoming substance.
After all of that.
Right.
Sorry,
Yeah.
folks, but this is a good topic, because I'm like, man, there's so many angles of
Yeah.
areas that even as I'm talking about, I'm like, I never really talk about it, but we see it in our communities all the time and call it normal.
Yeah.
And even how we partake sometimes. I mean, I'll be honest, if I'm going to Jamaica, I plan on being lit at least one day. And that is a misuse. I mean, that's a misuse of it, because you know,
Is it misuse though?
I don't
I
know.
don't think so.
I don't think that equates to a misuse, right?
Okay.
No. Look at us like,
Okay.
hold up, because I'm going to New Orleans in December, and I'm going to have me. However, but I think where we blur the line, and go back to the definition at the very top of this thing, because let's go back. Because I don't think you should be thinking that equates to misuse,
Yeah.
because those are, you're not doing it because you're depressed. You're not doing
Right.
it, right? You're going because you're having a good time and
Right.
you want to escape the work life, right? Now, if you're saying I gotta go home every day after work,
Right, to decompress.
That's very
Now you
different.
can do that.
yes. However, and even like sometimes you go out with your friends, you're having a good time, you're having a party, you're
Mhm.
enjoying a drink, and if someone gets drunk, that doesn't make them,
Right.
yeah, so you're not,
Mhm.
that's not the same.
Mhm.
But when we misuse something because it's the intent of why we're using it and the not just the amount, because it's not even always the amount.
Mm.
It's what we needed to get to,
Right,
so that
to
we
do.
can,
Yeah.
so that we can actually function as
Right.
what we figured out.
Mhm.
So I think of a person, and I'm trying not to identify people because they might watch, right?
Mhm.
But I think of a person who literally, they have to encounter this substance no matter what the day looks like. If it was a good day, bad day,
Right.
indifferent.
Right.
You're going to Jamaica, that's supposed to be a good time. I wanna have a good time, laugh a little bit, I'm gonna drink, I'm gonna have a good time.
Mhm.
That's very different than I just got off work, I'm gonna have a drink, I'm gonna have a
Right.
whole bottle so that I can black out
Right.
and go to bed.
Mhm.
Or I can black out and have a conversation with my kids because I can't stand them, because
Right.
pretend not parents. Right, like, so I don't want us to get to the point where it's like
Mhm.
sobriety is the
Yeah,
only
yeah,
form
yeah.
of health.
Mhm.
Right, because I do believe that we didn't mention it, but you're gonna do that, so I'm gonna shut up. Stop right there. But I also don't want us to be like, no, we can't even go out and, cause girl in Jamaica had one for me.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm like, if you go into any place that's having a good time
Have the good
and
time.
have the good time, but it's not like you're trying to escape.
Right.
And also you're not using it in order to that's the only way you can have a good time
Right.
in Jamaica.
Right.
Right, or it's the only way I can tolerate these people and have a
Right.
conversation.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Good point.
I think you're right.
In other words, don't take our drink. Don't take my good time away, because when I'm in New Orleans, I'm gonna have my drink.
Exactly. Hold on.
I'll stop you right now. I will have no parts of this one.
Right. But yes, going back to the tips for overcoming substance misuse and even supporting loved ones who struggle with substance use. For individuals, one is acknowledging the problem. So denial can be a major barrier, and it's important to be honest about how it's impacting your life, your health, and your relationships.
Mhm.
Right? Of course, there's also seeking professional help, and that can be either with therapy and counseling, or going to a rehabilitation program, or even going to support groups such as Alcoholics Anonymous, AA, or Narcotics Anonymous as well. Where
And
these can-
disclaimer,
Mhm.
really quickly, as we
Mhm.
talk about these two specifically, before we go with that Al-Anon,
Mhm.
specifically when it comes to certain substances, you need to consult a doctor, because we are not professionals when it comes to rehab and or removing yourself from a substance, particularly heroin, any opioid related, as well as alcohol. You really should consult a physician, because your body is also physically addicted. And now they're also finding that there's a possibility that the methamphetamine family is falling into that as well. So in order, disclaimer, it is best to consult a doctor to determine what form of treatment related to rehabilitation you may need for the substance in your system.
That's a good point.
So I just want to say that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because all of our license need to stay licensed.
Right. How would you advise a client then? Because I did have a past client who struggled with alcohol.
Oh.
Yeah,
100%, they need to have a medical professional.
but if they
And
don't have access,
If they don't have what access, you could get free, you can go to the emergency room.
immigration though, like if they're,
So you go to clinics, they're not, in New Jersey, if they're, well, depending on your state, because I am not in everyone's state, let me make this, this is for New Jersey, if they're in New Jersey, as well as Pennsylvania. If they're in New Jersey or Pennsylvania, there are clinics that also will see clients regardless of their status.
Okay. Yeah, I know that's a tricky one, because I did have a past clients who, because of like legal issues, they weren't immigrants, illegal in that case. And as a result, they couldn't access like medical healthcare as well, and they were also just paranoid around
Absolutely.
who to go to, where to
Right.
go.
But I would suggest in those cases, and especially if they're in a suburb or in a city, usually within certain cities, there are clinics that are specifically going to allot for slots that are related to not having medical coverage.
Mhm.
The information and data that you give them needs to just be about your health.
Yeah.
It's good to know. And then, of course, there's also identifying triggers and developing coping strategies. So understanding the people, places, or emotions that trigger your substance use, and working on strategies to avoid or manage these triggers, such as, again, mindfulness, deep breathing, or even calling a support group when needed. Speaking of support, building a support network. And by this, it means surrounding yourself with people who support your recovery, such as family, friends, or sponsors from the support group, having accountability partners, as well, who can be there for you in moments of weakness.
Yeah, and I think this one is for families that I know, which are mostly Black families, so I'm gonna talk to us for a second. This one is extremely important to remember because we have the hardest time realizing that if someone's sober and they're trying to be sober, because there's also harm reduction, and I don't know if we're gonna talk one way or the other, but specifically when people are trying sobriety, we have the hardest time with turning off our substance parties. Where for some, like, so I have an uncle who struggles, and so literally, whenever if he said he's coming, we're not drinking. Y'all can't handle that, don't come. And then sometimes it's to say that he's taking this serious as a family, we should take this serious too. And sometimes it's hard for people to say, well, why should I be able to have a good time? Does every party have to be that? Because then that means you also don't want to come unless you want him to have to sit there and not, and in some cases, it could just be one party that when it went wrong. So I'm very, like, if I know that that's what you are and you are important to me, I want to make sure that I give you the space to say, not every party's gonna be that one. And I'll even tell them, I'll be like, yo, this one we having drinks in the cake. So like, don't come to this. But if I know I want him there and I want all of my uncles there, I'm also gonna say this party is gonna be sober. And we should be able to learn how to party without having drinks. That's a whole nother song.
I think it goes right into the underestimating as a community the power of addiction and feeling like if they want to get off.
Yeah, like it's just willpower.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like it's more than willpower.
Right.
It is your supports. It is your community. It is us. And I think sometimes it's okay to say not everything has to be about a substance in the center of the celebration. That also sometimes could be food, because I'm like, can we not do dinner? Can we also play some things? Like,
That's true.
play some games. You know, like, too far. Everything gotta have food there. I know.
We having a family meeting, what you bringing?
Exactly. Like, we ain't really beating on nothing, but go ahead. Just want some thing. All right, I'm sorry. I'm just cutting all up here. I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's good. Another tip is developing healthy habits, which means replacing your substance use with healthier alternatives such as exercise, meditation, or creative hobbies. And this can help to reduce the cravings and improve your mental and physical well-being. Of course, staying patient and positive. So recovery takes time and setbacks may happen. Be kind to yourself during the process and understand that relapse is often part of recovery, and each day is a new opportunity to make progress. All right, Sharea already mentioned this, but considering medical assistance, depending on the substance, medication assisted treatments or MAT might be helpful. Drugs like methadone, buprenorphine, buprenorphine or naltrexone.
Oh God, now you got me messing up how it's said, but yes, go for it. I'll end up saying it before the end, hopefully.
Okay, or naltrexone can help ease withdrawal symptoms or reduce cravings. And then lastly, setting realistic goals. So break your recovery process into smaller, manageable steps and set short-term and long-term goals to track your progress and celebrate each achievement, no matter how small.
Absolutely. And also, I think, I was waiting to see if it was in here, but I don't really see it, so I'm gonna just jump in here. We just spoke about sobriety as the primary option for substance use, but there is harm reduction. And what that looks like is being able to find someone in treatment and or supporting your treatment to help you to see if there's a possibility that you can still use the substance and not use it in a misuse way. And so finding that support is gonna be really important in that one, because many times when we try to do that on our own, we go from this level of like cold turkey, 1 or 2 drinks. So I'm using drinks for a second, 1 or 2 this, but really being able to know that if the option of sobriety isn't what your first choice is, being able to talk to that professional who might understand harm reduction can help you to kind of decide what's the best way to make sure you're not using this substance in response to other areas that you might need to work on.
Mhm.
And so I think that's an important thing to remember, because statistically, although we're talking recovery, our community is more likely to use harm reduction even independent of treatment. And it also then ends to sobriety at some point for most of them when they choose that. So I think it's important to remember that it's not the only route isn't sobriety, but also doing it with someone that's a professional that can help you to determine what's best for the area and reason why you're using the substance can be helpful.
Yeah, definitely. And then, of course, if you are supporting your loved ones struggling with substance misuse, it's important to, one, educate yourself, offer non-judgmental supports, encourage the professional help as well. Help them set healthy boundaries, avoid enabling behavior. Like Sharea said, if someone is coming who you know struggles with a particular substance, maybe not using the substance around them, or even encouraging them to just try it, if you know what their goal is. Communicating with empathy, encouraging healthy alternatives, being patient and supportive through their relapse because it may happen, taking care of yourself because it can feel exhaustive if you're supporting another person through this process. And then lastly, also encouraging a support network. So it's not only you, right? Like if they have other resources, it can help to balance things out as well.
Yes. You're not trying to stand alone in this.
Yeah, definitely. And okay, so I think those are the key tips that we'll talk about for today. I do have a list of resources for individuals struggling with substance misuse. So maybe we can include these in the description once this goes out.
Absolutely.
All right. Any final points before we wrap up?
Nope.
Okay.
I think we hit on a lot.
We definitely did.
This was a good conversation though, because I don't think I've spoken about it in a while, but it's good to hear. And I'm sure that things have come up for others if they're listening, that I'd love to hear if anyone has any questions and or anyone's thoughts on it, because we also are not the only authority in this area. So I'd love to hear if someone else has some extra information or anything they'd like to share. And
yeah, please put in the comment section for sure. And then Sharea, if you can walk us through the wellness tips.
Drink your water, move your body, eat well, sleep well, balance what you're eating in and out. Make sure you get your rest. I said that already. Vitamin D, because it's getting ready to get dark early. So make sure you're getting it. Cause I was taking a walk yesterday and it was like 6 something. And I'm like, wait a second.
Yeah.
It's midnight out here. Like, so just make sure you're getting what you need. Be mindful, make sure you take care of yourself spiritually as well. If that's prayer, pray. If that's walking and meditating, do so, and be mindful of taking the time to be present in your whole self and find joy every single day of your life. That can be a small thing like the laughter of your child. I mean, I had a very cute, adorable child come visit us yesterday or Tuesday, and I was like, oh, he needs to work with us. He needs to come and work every day so I can have this amount of joy. And so being able to find those little moments that actually could make your entire day are extremely important. And then be compassionate with yourself on any of your life journeys. We talked about substances today, but it could be trauma, it could be heartbreak, it could be a number of things that we all are dealing with, and just be kind to yourself as you're doing so.
Yeah, completely. Right, and now we'll go into what are you grateful for? And as always, if you're watching, you can put your gratitude in the comment section as well.
What am I grateful for? Sane mind. I was thinking the other day around, actually, no. I am grateful for other professionals that remind me that I have a legacy to leave. So yesterday we did a training on the importance of ethics in domestic violence or in intimate partner violence. And it just reminded me that I still have so much to give and people really want it. So that was enjoyable. So I'm grateful to be able to have a legacy that now I can leave.
I am grateful for village. I'm grateful for community and support. I don't think we talk about the importance of that enough in this generation. Because I know it can, while we all look to find community, we also isolate a lot or cut off a lot. So I'm just grateful for genuine connection.
Mm. I'm actually gonna copy that too. Yeah, because my birthday was this month. And people kept asking, like, what's the best part of turning or like, having your birthday? And the biggest thing was just like my community because they showed up for me so strongly. I just felt really loved and I realized I have really strong like connections in my life right now. So
That's good.
definitely.
Absolutely. So all how grateful our connections.
Mhm.
It's nice.
And then affirmation time.
Take it
like
away.
one round.
Take it away, Sharea. I affirm that my body is safe.
Mm. I have self-control.
I am strong in my weakness.
I continue to love myself.
Mm. It's okay to make mistakes.
I'm a jokester. I'm a joke right now. I was gonna say, I can be drunk in love. Okay.
I mean,
In Jamaica.
right, not always.
There is a time and place for everything.
Mm.
I am allowed to break generational trauma.
Mm. Mm. I can overcome all challenges.
Finding a new way can be scary, but I can do it.
Mm.
And on that note,
That's good.
we are good.
That is all for today. We will see you all next month for another topic, and we hope that you did enjoy this. If you did, again, put it in the comment section, like the video, give us some feedback if you can, and of course, you can always share resources with each other as well.
Absolutely. Y'all be well.
All right, bye.